2015. Can you believe how fast time flies? Closed session meeting of the Board of Directors of Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I was going to take roll call. I can't do that, Vanessa's not here yet.
Since we have a forum, we ought to start.
All right, okay. So, Director Gillette.
Here.
Director Toombs.
Present.
Director Sharis-Watt.
Here.
And I, Len Welsh, President, am here. Vanessa Cordova is not here yet. At this time, we will entertain any comments the public would like to make before we go into closed session. Go ahead.
What, so we're not okay.
Well, it's a small room.
Yeah,
Small
well,
crowd.
I don't know whether this part is recorded. First item on your closed agenda, you have an excellent panel of candidates and I guess I have no recommendation to make. As you are or will be privy to information that the public does not know, so you can't say anything at this point. I would ask you to ask yourselves and the candidates whether they can realistically make changes in the police force when their job is only temporary, whether they would consider applying for the job permanently. If so, would they consider either temporarily or permanently if the job was only for part-time GM. Item 2, most of the current discussion of the MOU rightfully centers on the matters of salaries and pensions. There's another reason why I think that the MOU should be rejected. The old MOU gives the board as well as the chief of police the right to dismiss officers for cause, while the proposed MOU gives the right only to the chief of police. In light of the Barrow incident, the board needs to retain that right. I won't make that comment. Considering salaries and pensions, the community was only given a chance to look at the PNG report Monday afternoon, not much time to properly digest it and to base accepting the MOU on it. The analysis from the PNG did not analyze the sort of base pension cost implications that giving a 3% raise makes, even though officers make the 3% cost raises their base pay, and therefore their pension, even though the officers make the 3% pension contribution. This was pointed out previously by other people. I think it is not advisable to make any salary commitments until the community can review the PMG report and CalPERS gives a better analysis of future pension obligations by the district. I think that's the key thing to keep in mind. And 3, about item 3, I asked, why is there still existing litigation with associated legal fees in the writ case? The 2 or 3 people involved were all removed early and should not be pursued for anything. Please just finish this up. Thank you.
Thanks for the comment. Anybody else? I'm going to ask you to make it brief if you can, because we have a ton of business to do.
Okay, I'll be very brief. My name is David Bergen, but everybody knows that here.
David Bergen.
David Bergen, yes. B-E-R-G-E. Okay, I don't believe that there's a need for an MOU. The department has been running without one. The officers are still being overpaid. They don't really need a raise, in my estimation, and I think other people agree. So I think what we should do is just drop this MOU entirely and start from scratch. It has too many problems with the people who wrote it and worked on it in the past. I think we need a family. In terms of the interim job, I have not had a chance to really look at everybody. In looking at the handout on the resumes, it looks like only one of the officers who's interested in the job has a background in business administration. And I think that's the most important part of the new job. So again, I'm not for or against any one of these people. I don't know what their other backgrounds might be, but I think that is a consideration we should make. Yes, and in terms of that, we really need somebody who's into community policing, not into zero tolerance type of policing. And I agree with the previous speaker regarding the third item having to do with the writ. I thought that was completely over with. It apparently is not for some reason. And I think it should be ended immediately. I also would like to know how much it's continuing to cost us. And I would like to know which legal firm you're discussing this with at this time. Just as a point of interest. And that's about it for those three items. Thank you very much.
Thanks for
I
coming.
do appreciate your time.
Hi, I'm Catherine Deniergard, and I'll make my comments brief. Regarding the writ petition, I think you already know my feelings and why we really need to end it. To answer the previous speaker's question from the business end, the non-petitioners have been addressed by both Benson Bridget and by the new law firm. Somebody close to it said that both the lawyers for Kathy Coastal and Jeff Collar had been contacted and in touch with the new law firm, Randy Riddle. Okay, so on to interview candidates. I feel that the 5 most important things for the candidates are integrity, first of all, transparency and accountability, a commitment to that, and giving Kensington a chance to steer its own course without trying to steer it. That we have a tremendous opportunity here to really look at our structure, which has been dysfunctional in certain ways. Even like 5 unpaid board members trying to run this whole vast thing, and the relationship between the board and the police department. So openness to what Kensington needs and wants. And lastly, save Kensington money, really do everything possible to run a really trim-type department. In terms of the MOU, I agree with many of the other speakers to throw it out and let us choose our future. And again, we really do need to look at these many structural problems which are very important. We have a 1950s structure with a very, very different age and culture and complexity of business. I lived here in the 50s and things were just so much simpler. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. I think at this time we need to, did you say something, Kevin?
Could I?
Could you make it brief, please?
Brief second?
I have my stopwatch, okay.
I know you got a lot to do tonight. Thanks for the opportunity. The 3 things on the closed agenda. I think you do a really nice job of getting good candidates on board for the position. There's a nice range of skills and qualifications. The concern I keep hearing in the interim position for someone who can give us good practices, the best practices in the police force, obviously should raise staff morale, community confidence, and command authority, and respect by the force based on experience. And I think we've got some good people in the mix. But the person also has to be able to develop a budget. And it should be done in conjunction with community members, the KPOA, and finance committee. We've got a lot of experience in town. No one has all the answers and a lot more data. And responsible thinking. The town has a 5-year budget that's not a single line or a bar graph, but a range of projections based on the vicissitudes that are possible and all the variables that are related to income and expense. And so one question that many residents hope to ask the candidates is why they would want an interim job, given their great talents and levels of experience. And I would accept an answer that says that some of them hope for a more permanent arrangement here, but it should be clear that most people in the community, I think, feel that the 2 jobs have to be separate, and that the general manager job, which we have to have, can be a part-time job as it is now, and that we have a lot of options with respect to the police. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I'm not sure anyone fiscally responsible in the community thinks we can settle on a new MOU with the police before we have in place the kind of 5-year budget that I just described. And so I hope that although it's not comfortable, that we can continue on the terms with patience until we can have something else. If we do something precipitous now, it could bind us for further negotiations later, as everybody knows. And the third thing, I am also not clear with respect to the people who at one time allegedly are actually involved in that now settled writ at one stage or another. We've heard that some people who were partly on our article a while or thought they were on or weren't on it, have been asked or being asked to sign an agreement or compensate fees or both, but I've also heard the contrary. So could the board please clarify that? I mean, I think that the agreement we felt was behind us. Why can't we declare it done if we can't? And could you comment on this individually?
We'll try to do that in open session.
Thanks, man.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we're going to break and go to closed session, back at 7:30. Move to break.
Are these working? Are they working? Are they working? Are they working now? Getting closer.
How about now?
They can hear me, I think. No? Can you hear me now? No. Can we hear me now? Everyone can hear in the back? No.
Move on up. Much closer.
So, Kevin, are we going to fix this or not? What do you think? Oh, woohoo! Hold that thought. Can everybody hear? Okay, well,
Let's share that one mic, because I think
pray
that's
to the God of electronics and sound. Okay, everybody, welcome to the May 14th, 2015 meeting of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. My name is Len Welsh. I'm the board president, and at this time I'll take roll call. Director Cordova?
Here.
Director Gillette?
Here.
Director Toombs?
Present.
Director Sheriff Watt?
Here.
And I do want to note that we began the session before we went to closed session. Vanessa wasn't here at the beginning, but she came in before we went to closed session, so she's been present at the entire closed session. Reporting out on the closed session, we only got to the first item on the closed session agenda, which was interviewing potential candidates for the interim chief, and we have not completed that process. We will be returning to closed session again later this month to complete the process. The other two items we did not get to, and we'll be going back to closed session after the public session is over. Everybody here okay? All right, how about now? Really, this is so unsanitary. Glad nobody's around here's got Ebola, that's all I can say. All right, so we're now beginning the open session, and if anybody would like to, from the public, would like to make a comment on an item not agendized, please feel free to step up and make a comment. I'm going to ask you to try and keep it brief. We're starting way late, and we have a lot of business to do tonight.
Yeah, Gloria Morrison, and actually my question is, I have a comment about the police department report, and will that be told that is really the question, because it's on the consent calendar. Microphone. It's already there. Wow, I thought everyone could hear me all the time. Okay, I'm Gloria Morrison, I've lived here a long time, and I have a concern about the police department report. Since it's on the consent calendar, I just want to be sure that it's pulled, or I can ask my question now.
Okay, well, you're a little early with that, but we'll note that you want it pulled, okay?
Yeah, police department report.
Yes, that's item number, let's see here.
F.
F. Yes?
So I'll wait.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm Leonard Schwartzberg, and I've just returned from 15 days in Israel, and I just want to say, if we think we have problems, we're lucky.
Thank you for that comment. We really are lucky. We're blessed to live in this community. Anybody else with a comment?
Katya Deniergard. I just want to make a plea for ending meetings much earlier than they've been ending. I lose it after 10, and I think a lot of other older people or less energetic people do as well. And it's unfortunate that the board has all, this tremendous load of work, but you can't expect people to stay up so late, so that it would be good to end at 10 or 10:30.
Yeah, we'll do our best, but part of it is, this is partly my fault, keeping the comments brief and to the point, and I appreciate the brevity of your comment and the advice. Anybody else?
My name is Frank Lossie, and I've been in Kensington about 60 years. Yes, I wanted to follow up on this last comment. I think it seems to me that it's unfortunate that the board is taking on a lot of stuff that could be taken on by a part-time city manager had you first made the decision to look for the part-time city manager first of all, and that person could take over some of what you're being saddled with, like in the previous meeting of interviewing more people and more people.
Well, I hope that will be the case once we make the hire. I truly do, because it's not fun for any of us to be having these late night meetings. So thank you for the comment. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm sorry, you got to remind me, which question? We haven't, unfortunately, we were not able to get to that item in the closed session. All I can tell you is that there are 2 people left in the action. They are seeking, they're seeking dismissal. We have to discuss that and make a legal decision. That's all I can say. Unless, Pat, you think there's something else.
I don't think so. I think we'll discuss tonight whether we're going to proceed with the motion for attorney's fees or not against the remaining 2. I'm sorry? Oh, I think we'll decide in the closed session whether we're going to proceed with the motion for attorney's fees against the remaining petitioners or not. But we haven't discussed that at all within the board.
And, if you can stand to stay that late, we will report out, but it's going to be late.
Folks, you got to use the podium. I'm sorry. This is one of the reasons we get delayed.
I'll answer your question, Catherine. There are 2 remaining petitioners.
Am
Kathy
I one
Kosel.
of them?
I'm sorry.
Am I considered a remaining
No.
petitioner?
I was just answering it.
Okay.
You're
The 2
out.
remaining petitioners are Jeff Kohler and Kathy Kosel. In our opinion, they don't believe that they are still part of the lawsuit.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay.
That's a big weight off my heart.
Okay, if we're finished with public comments, then I'm going to ask for board member comments. Vanessa?
I just have 2 brief mentions. I was pleased to be invited to a luncheon on fire prevention by the Diablo Fire Safety Council, along with Chief Nagel, who's the president of the fire board here in Kensington, and Lance Maples, our chief, who was asked to present a summary of our amazing fuel reduction program, which when you actually see it on the big screen is quite impressive. I didn't realize how many other agencies within the 9-county area look to Kensington for their, not remediation, but fuel reduction planning and implementation. So it was quite informative and interesting. And then next week, I'll be a guest of Director Andy Katz, who's the president of the East Bay Municipal utility district, and we'll be talking about the impact on the drought and the current infrastructure projects that will be touching our district borders. And I'll report back about that in June.
So I have a couple things to say. The first is I'm just so pleased at the candidates that we had for the chief general manager position. We were really lucky to get wonderful, wonderful candidates, 5 of whom showed up for the public meeting that was held on Monday. And we were really happy to have several members of the public there as well to ask questions and listen to the presentations that were made by those candidates. So I think we should feel really happy that we have such a wonderful group of people from whom we will get to make a choice, about whom we will get to make a choice. And then I want to talk about something that happened in connection with that, because I think it really is important in terms of the healing of the community and of the board. Rochelle and I were charged with responsibility for getting this whole thing together with respect to the interviews on the interim chief and general manager position. And that was a bit of a daunting task because it was a short time frame, and there are a lot of rules and regulations about what you can and can't do, can and can't ask, who can ask questions, who can attend meetings, et cetera, et cetera. We got it a little bit wrong with respect to the board, and as a result, the board members, other than Rochelle and I, 3 board members were not allowed to attend the meeting. That was our fault. We misunderstood the rules with respect to the Brown Act, and as a result, those 3 members could not attend the meeting. Why am I bringing this up? Because that could have been interpreted as something purposeful or something that was done in a way to exclude people. And while there was a little bit of tension and obviously disappointment among the board members, ultimately people realized that it was just simply a mistake. They rose to the occasion, they watched the video, those people who couldn't attend, which was apparently very difficult to hear or understand. But we came together as a board and as one and said, okay, there was a mistake that was made, we're going to accept that and we're going to move forward. And so we were able to come tonight and have the interviews with the 3 candidates that were selected out of the 5, have a very productive interview session, and I think we'll be able to make a very good choice. So I see that as a positive and as something that we can look forward to as a board that's going to work cohesively together going forward and assume good intentions on everybody's part, with the understanding that everybody screws up every once in a while, me more than usual. So many thanks to the board members. Oh, and we had very good advice from our counsel, who sort of guided us through this and said, what? Oh, no. Randy's over there, Randy Riddle, one of our new lawyers.
Thank you. Rochelle?
Oh, sure. We had the first meeting of the Parks Building Committee on May 6th, so thank you for all who attended. We have a current committee numbering 7. But if you would like to come and attend, we will notice the meetings. There should be one shortly. We prepared a job posting for a seismic engineering report on this building that will be going live tomorrow. There was a little bit of a delay in what we intended. We needed it reviewed legally, and then unfortunately, as I'm sure you all know, that Lynn broke her arm, and so there were some delays unforeseeable. But that posting will go out, and we will be soliciting estimates. And then we will meet again and make a recommendation for the board, hopefully very soon in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Rochelle. Chuck?
I have 2 things. First, I want to thank the board for a very collegial session in there. I was very pleased we were all able to work together and overcome some of the minor difficulties about the notice. And thank you all. It really was a good collaborative session. I really appreciate that. The second thing is more personal. I wanted to thank Chief Harmon here for 6 years of service that I've had with him and 8 years of service to the community. I may be in the minority, but I think he's done a yeoman's job in some very, very difficult times, swimming upstream against some pretty strong political opposition, and I'm pleased to have worked with him for 6 years. It's been an honor and a privilege. Chief, thank you very much.
I want to echo that. Chief, I'm going to miss working with you quite a bit. I haven't known you as long as Chuck, but I think you're a wonderful person, and I'm really going to miss working with you. Let me say, first of all, thank you to Lynn and Pat for working so hard.
Rochelle.
I'm sorry, to Rochelle and Pat. I don't know.
Cheryl. Cheryl, her other name.
Rochelle and Pat for working so hard on selecting the excellent candidates that we interviewed today. They did a lot of work in a very short amount of time. There were some glitches. We all overcame them, but we did get excellent candidates, and they have been working extremely hard, and their hard work is not even finished. So thanks again for your work. Little note, Gretchen Gilfillan mentioned she would like to be on the Park Building Committee, Rochelle, so if you could add her to the list, that would be great. And finally, I wanted to mention that that I went to the fire board meeting last night, so did Rochelle, and so did Pat, and I asked the board to consider a joint finance committee meeting to go over both the fire department budget and the police district budget and do a little compare and contrast. And there was quite a bit of discussion on the fire board about it, and what they decided in the end they wanted to do was, I guess maybe the best way to characterize it is test the community's interest at first. They're having a planning meeting on June 2nd, or rather a budget finance committee meeting on the 2nd, and a regular fire board meeting as scheduled, second Wednesday in June. Both will be opportunities to ask as many questions really as people want to ask about the budget. I personally was impressed with the last finance committee the police district had, because we sort of got down to a level of detail that we haven't done in a very long time, and I think eventually we'll want to do that with the fire department's budget. And I think actually I'm going to ask Larry Nagel, the president of the fire board, to just say a few words, but I think there is a plan following the June meetings for some sort of follow-up. And Larry, could I ask you to say a few words?
As Len said, my name's Larry Nagel. I am the president of the board of directors of the Kensington Fire Protection District, and I've been living in town since 2008. Yes, at the meeting, first of all, I would like to note on a very positive note that we're seeing fire district board members come to police district board meetings, and we're seeing police district board members coming to fire district board meetings and making constructive comments. And I think the two districts are working much closer than has been the case in the past, and I think that's a very positive note. The one thing that I think we can all agree on is that there's a tremendous amount of incorrect information or misinformation out there that people are getting, things that are just absolutely wrong or just misunderstood. And I think it behooves both of us to try to get a little better public understanding of just what it is the police district does and what it is the fire district does. Now, this started as a sort of as Len said, we were thinking about having a joint meeting on the budget. One member at the meeting last night pointed out, well, you should talk about more than the budget. You should talk about what you guys actually do, because there's a lot of people in town that don't know. And so that's sort of the tact we're going to take. We're going to start, both boards are going to start by articles in the Outlook. Well, we're not really sure the best way to reach the public. I mean, there's a small number of people that come to the meetings, a very small number of people that come to the fire district meetings. we don't know whether the Outlook is the best way to go, or whether having a public information meeting is the best way to go, or whether Facebook, Twitter, whatever is the best way to go. But we're going to try with an article in the Outlook explaining just exactly what it is we do and how we spend your money. And after that, we'll see how that goes. As Lynn said, on June the 2nd, there will be a finance committee meeting of the fire district where we actually pound out the details of the fire district expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year. And then the results of that meeting will be presented to the full board of the fire district at the regular meeting, as Len said, on the second Wednesday of June. So these are public meetings. We'd love to see the public come. If you have questions, we typically drill down into the details, sometimes to excruciating detail, but it's necessary that we do that. So I think both of us are aware of the fact that there's a lot of things that the public is unaware of and needs to be more aware of. So I think both Len and I are going to be working on trying to solve that problem and get the public more on board with what it is we do and why we spend your money the way we spend your money. You're talking about the fire district meetings? Yes, both of those meetings are public meetings. They will be posted the requisite 72 hours at a time. They will be posted on the website. They're posted on the bulletin board down across the street from the Chevron station. They're posted in City Hall or at the Public Safety Building, and I think they're posted at the library too. Yeah, there's a standard formula for where they're posted. Probably the easiest way is to look in the website, but for sure they will be also at the Public Safety Building, so you can just go to the firehouse.
If you can get to the website, that's the best way. And the fire board. If you just Google Kensington Fire Board, you'll go right there. Yeah. KensingtonFire.org. Just say Kensington Fire and you'll find it.
Larry, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I just want to say thank you it was a good meeting last night. It was a good discussion, and I do think we have an opportunity for the two districts to work more closely together and more productively, and I appreciate the reception we got last night.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now staff comments. Chief, did you have any comments to make?
Yes, I do. Lynn Walter asked me to read the staff report that she had prepared for this meeting. She wanted to report on the progress made on the district's Transparency Certificate of Excellence. She goes on to write, at its March 12th meeting, the board voted unanimously to bring the process of earning the California Special District Association District of Transparency Certificate. Since last month's meeting, the following documents have been posted to the district's website: the KPPCSD mission statement, board member ethics training certificates for the 4 directors who have earned this, list of compensation for board members and staff. She also writes that she's obtained a copy of the Fector & Company letter to the State Controller's Office, confirming that it filed the required fiscal year 2013 documents with that office on May 23rd of this year. She's also reporting that the Forms 700, she goes on to write, another important component of the district's transparency is the director's completion of Form 700. She writes that she's pleased to report that she's received copies for all 5 directors. These are public documents, copies of which are kept on file at the district office. And finally, she reports that for the 2014 audit, the field work was completed on April 23rd and 24th. She reports that it went smoothly, and the remaining elements are currently being completed. Vector and Company expects to finish within the next few weeks. And that's all she has to report.
Thank you, Chief. I just want to mention, for those who don't know, it's been referred to, but Lynn broke her arm 2 days ago. It was a fairly serious break, and she's going to have to go to surgery for it next week sometime. So we're going to be losing a substantial amount of her services in the next several weeks, and that's part of the reason for the last item on the agenda. We'll go into that in due course, but I just wanted you all to know she fairly seriously hurt herself, and that's why she's not here, and it is going to create some issues for us for the next several weeks. All right, so moving on to the consent calendar, we already got a request for one item to be removed. That was item F, and I know there's another item that's controversial. Chief, I may need your help with this. It was the item in the March minutes that was contested by both Kathy Cosell and Haig Harris in a subsequent letter. They're both asking for a change in the wording. Do you happen to have the wording that Lynn proposed for the minutes handy?
No, she didn't provide those to me.
All right. Well, I guess what I'm going to suggest is that we'll get to you. Don't worry. You're next. I'm going to suggest that we simply add Kathy Cosell's note. Kathy Cosell's, I think she sent us an email, and Haig Harris's email to the record, and people can make their own judgment about what was said. Unfortunately, that's the meeting where the recording failed for a certain portion of the meeting, so all we had were Lynn's notes, and both Haig Harris and Kathy Cosell felt that the notes proposed as minutes didn't adequately reflect what was said. So if it's okay with the...
I actually think that, I read the email from Kathy, and if I remember it correctly, the issue that's, the sentence that is at issue is, he said, meaning Haig Harris said she had her name removed initially because she had changed her mind, and she said that's not what he said. He said something else, and I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what her wording was.
That's the
But
wording, yeah.
I actually think we should just take that sentence out. I don't think she disagreed with the rest of it, where it said he represented Kathy Cosell, whom he cited as one individual who should have been let off. He said that he represented Kathy Cosell, whom he cited as one individual who should have been let off, that she had not been a party to the litigation. I think we should take the next sentence out and then say he asked the board to instruct its attorneys that Kathy Cosell was not part of the litigation.
What page are you on there, Pat?
I'm on page 5 of the March minutes.
Shall we take a vote on that? Sounds okay to me. I could second that as a motion.
I move that we do that.
Let me just read it.
Okay, Chuck, go ahead.
I just wanted to read it. I didn't get a chance to see it.
Without having the email in front of me, I'd prefer not to do anything. I'd rather just table the minutes and take care of it next time.
Did you guys get the email?
I have not seen the email.
I like that even better.
I have them here if you would like to see them.
Can we be a little bit more judicious than...
Yeah, let's do
All right,
that.
what do you want to do?
Well, we would like to see the emails. The three of us haven't seen them.
Can we just table it in the interest of time?
Yeah, you
not
wanna
to
All right, let's table it till next time. Okay.
If that's all right.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I just wanted to say I would hope that you would include Haig Harris's email in the minutes, because the minutes there did not include very much of what he actually said. So I'd really like to see his email.
If the community communication, we'd stick it in probably anyway. I'm sorry.
We'll put it in the board packet for next time. All right? Any other items people want to pull?
I just wanted to pull item C just briefly. I'm not going to go into it in great depth.
You got to use the microphone, man.
I wanted to pull item C just very briefly. I'm not going to get into great depth about it, I promise. Oh, can I talk now?
Yeah,
Oh.
go ahead.
Carl?
I would like to ask some questions on the single item in the financial.
Well, why don't you stand up there? We'll tag team each other here.
You're talking about item D?
Item
or
C is the finance. The finance
I'm
report.
kind of intimidated by Chuck wearing a tie tonight, so I don't know.
Me too.
I would like to know if the legal fees of $60,500 include all of the billing that we have had and will have from the past law firm. And if the April billing from the new law firm are also included in that $60,500.
To the first part of the question, is that all the billings from Hanson Bridget? No. To the second part of the question, is the billing from the new law firm included in that particular billing?
Yes.
I don't believe so, but I'd have to check. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's too early. I don't think we've received the bill yet.
We have received one bill from the new firm, and that was for services in March, and that could be in there, but it was a fairly small amount. So it may be, but I'd have to check. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
All right, thank you.
Back to my one issue here. I read the budget and I looked over there's some variances we're still wrestling with here, but then I read Chief Harmon's report about why those variances exist. And my takeaway from it is the variances arise because there's timing differences in when a payment's made or a bill's received. Is that pretty much it, Chief?
Absolutely.
Okay, so, but we're still wrestling with the idea of putting some kind of marker in here on a monthly basis about what the variance is there for, and if we can work on that, but my only point was it's really a timing question of when we pay a bill or when we get a bill to be paid that reflects these variances and these numbers. Otherwise, the budget is pretty darn close to actual, taking into account timing issues.
That's one of the things I was trying to explain in my general manager's report. When you talk about variances, I think a lot of people in the community think of maybe large corporations that have fluctuations in sales and stuff. And what I was trying to explain in my general manager's report is we're pretty even, and we know what our numbers are throughout the year. And a true variance, to me anyway, would be when something comes up that we were completely unexpected. A new lawsuit, a new something we had to purchase, a piece of equipment or something that threw everything out of whack. So that's what I view a variance as, and that's what I was trying to talk about. One of the things that comes up every meeting is when, just like you said, Director Toombs, that we have little fluctuations in when we receive a bill. Richmond PD is terrible at billing. They said they were going to go to a monthly billing cycle this fiscal year. They fell flat on that, and we're lucky if it's even close to being on time quarterly. And that's one of the things. And every month I'm asked, well, why is there nothing in the Richmond dispatch billing? So you're absolutely right. There's just the timing issue of when we receive the bill and when we pay it. And for me, variances are those big items that do come up that are out of the norm, or something that the board passes at a meeting that shows up in the budget that we paid for and it wasn't ever part of the budget. I think those are what we call true variances, and that's what I was trying to discuss in my general manager's report.
Fair enough.
Okay, somebody wanted to pull item F. Who was that?
Mrs. Morrison.
Come on up, Gloria, sorry.
Yes, once again, Gloria Morrison. And I'm looking at the item, investigation of alleged misconduct. And I'm looking at the fourth paragraph on the allegation that an officer used a disparaging remark in describing the community. The allegation was found to be sustained. Now, I read a lot of these things for my laugh for the day, but I have to ask, what then is the response of the police department to an officer who shouldn't have said it, but heaven knows it wasn't that serious? But what, Chief Harmon, do you do when this is reported to you?
Okay. First of all, we never speak or talk about in public session about personnel complaints. However, I can make an exception in this case. Okay, the person who made the despairing remark was me. And what had happened, we received basically a sound bite of a conversation I had with an individual that recorded my conversation without my knowledge. And in that sound bite, I described members of a community. I used a term that I would swear on my children's life. I didn't know what the term meant. But after the investigation was completed, thinking back on it, I think what I did is I just repeated what the person I was talking to said. I think I said something like, and like you say, the so-called, the term that I use at
I hope you weren't talking about me.
Anyway, I don't even know what the true definition of that term is, but to answer your question, what would happen to an individual
an officer, say, who were
down the road? On something like this, they would probably get a written reprimand. However, since it was me and I'm no longer going to be employed by the district, I think that takes care of it.
I was just curious about this sort of thing because it feeds in, I didn't know it was you, obviously, but it feeds into one of my feelings about a new police chief, a new general manager, where I hope there is a real effort at community awareness, community, now I can't think of the word I had in mind, but getting together with the community of police officers, knowing who those kids going to school are, coming back. We don't, we have crime, but we don't have heaps and heaps of serious crime. And I don't think that this is real serious, but I would hope the training to sensitivity to the community is a part of what the new police chief is primed on. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. All right, do we have any other issues with the consent calendar? If not, do we have a motion to adopt?
I move we adopt the consent calendar.
Hold on. Yes, ma'am. No, we didn't pull A and B. Well, wait a minute.
No, we had to continue A.
We're tabling A. And B, is that the one that you had? Another one? Which one is that? Do you want to come up?
This was from April 9, and in the minutes it reads that my dog was kicked to death, and I couldn't understand why you were giving me condolences, so I listened to the tape, and what I actually said was I named the dog's name. The name of the pug that was kicked to death was My Fun. So I said, let us mourn the passing of My Fun, a little pug dog, and it was heard as My Pug. Or it was written as My Tug. So I would like it corrected.
I do remember you corrected me on that.
Yeah, and I didn't understand, but I do have a little bit of a speech impediment, so if I would like the minutes just corrected to read My Fun.
How do you spell that? How do you spell that?
I can email it to you, MEI and then FUN.
Okay, all right.
And then also, it wasn't somebody's dog, it was Stephanie's dog, and I said that also on the tape.
Okay, so Stephanie's dog.
My Fun.
Got
A
it.
little pug dog.
And it was not much fun, to say the least. Anyway, thank you for clarifying. And I'm still sorry about the dog. That's really very sad. Okay, if we're done with items.
We have a motion on the floor. I need a second and a vote.
Shall we make a motion for item A to continue it?
Yes.
I move that we continue item A, which are
Okay.
minutes from March 12th.
Okay, second it.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Other than that?
I'm sorry, you got to slow down for the slow guy over here. Who seconded that motion?
Pat did. We both did. Take your choice.
Okay, so now Pat still has a motion on the floor to adopt the consent.
All in favor?
Well, I need a second.
Pat, second.
I moved it, Chief. I moved the item, Pat seconded.
Okay, I thought that was just to table item A.
Yeah.
Oh, you're moving
so
consent.
now we're moving to adopt
The
the
consent calendar minus
Altered
Before we
calendar.
had the My Fund announcement, Pat had stated that she was going to make a motion to adopt the consent calendar, then we sidetracked. So what I need is,
Okay, I'll make a motion. I move that we adopt the consent calendar with the amendment to the minutes as requested by Ms. Denegard.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now, do we have a motion to, oh, that's it. That's done, right? So, we move on to District Old Business, Item 1. An update on the formation of a committee to research and report back on the board on possible alternatives to the current general manager, chief of police position, and other issues related to district structure and mission statement. This item was continued over from the April 9th meeting. Is there any update on this?
Yeah, really quickly here, Vanessa and I are working on a position paper that lays out the issues we think are relevant to this committee. We discussed not putting it on the agenda tonight because we have a pretty full plate. So we mutually agreed, we're still hashing through the actual text of the document, but we also agreed, let's don't put it on now. We have a whole lot of other stuff that is front burner stuff. So that's
Okay,
where we
so
are.
basically nothing to report. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I wouldn't call that nothing.
The
At
paper's
this
been
time,
written.
nothing at this time to, well, whatever you want to say. Okay, so we're going to, unless you want to add anything, Vanessa, we'll just move on, correct?
No, thanks. Chuck's done a great job, and we'll have a lot to report next month.
All right. Update on the interim chief selection process. We sort of did that, but Pat, would you like to say anything?
We interviewed the 3 candidates tonight. We will have another meeting on May 26th to do some further interviewing and hopefully make some recommendations, decisions and recommendations. So as of now, we're in good shape. The May 26th meeting will be a special closed session meeting, right?
Right.
Yes.
Who are the 3 candidates?
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't announce that. I apologize. It's Kevin Kyle, Kevin Hart, and Ed Lavaroni.
one more time, please.
Kevin Kyle, Kevin Hart, and Ed Lavaroni. In no specific order. Yeah. I think 2 of the candidates are in the back. I don't know if Kyle, Kevin Hart is there, and Ed Lavaroni. And I think that Kevin Kyle may have left.
No minutes.
We had one woman apply, actually. We asked her to be part of the 6 people we invited back, and she self-selected out. She decided not to. Believe me, I am a champion of women, if you read anything about me.
And for those of you who really want to see the complete program from Monday night, it's on the district website. Be patient. It's a little slow starting because it's just bad technology. But I soldiered through it. It's an hour and a half with some pretty good comments by the 5 people who came to your meeting on Monday night. And it's really, most of you, a lot of you were there. I saw people who had their screen time. And then if you weren't there, do take a look at it online.
Yeah, I just want to say it's difficult listening. The recording wasn't the best in the world. We seem to have some karmic issue with sound, but you can make out a fair amount of it if you listen closely. Okay, moving on to new business. At this time, we would like to have a presentation on the analysis we received from the Public Management Group on the budgetary impact of the proposed MOU with the Kensington Police Officers Association. Adam, can you come up and lead us?
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for letting me be here today. Thank you to the board members, Chief Harmon, appreciate having this opportunity. Before I start, do you have a time limit you want me to stick to? Or we?
How about 20 minutes?
Okay, I think that works. All right, so I've met many of you here today at our last meeting where we introduced the public law group. My name is Adam Benson. I'm actually part of our firm's consulting firm, which is called the Public Management Group. I took a look at the KPOA MOU, and I applied the parameters, the economic parameters that are included in the MOU to the district's finances, and developed this presentation that was included in the packet that was posted on the district's website. So for those of you who have the packet, I'm looking at slide number 3. Whenever I do a financial analysis, I like to get a good overview of the community that I'm looking at. Kensington is an unincorporated community here in Contra Costa County. It's a police district, a police protection district, and a community services district, and you have 3 primary areas of focus. The first is park and recreation, the second being solid waste, and the third being police services. Police services are the largest chunk of what you do. The board is obviously the policy-making entity, 5 members who are elected. They give a directive to the chief, who carries out their role. I looked at income and employment statistics in Kensington and found that relative to nearby communities, this is a wealthier community that has strong underlying income and employment statistics. When I just looked at median household income, median family income, per capita income, and unemployment rate, I found that Kensington ranked highest or lowest on the unemployment side among just the nearest neighbors that you have. Turning to slide 5, I also looked at the community's housing profile. Given that the budget relies on property taxes as the primary source of revenue, this is very important to understand. What I found was that Kensington has a pretty significant number of pre-Proposition 13 housing units, which is housing that was purchased prior to 1978. And essentially that locks in the property tax revenue that you collect back to that historic date, capped at a 2% annual increase. When I looked at what other communities have, so I found that Kensington had approximately 25% of its housing units pre-Prop 13. Berkeley and El Cerrito were at 12% and 17% respectively. So that means that there's some potential for increased assessed valuation beyond what other communities might naturally see above the 2% cap that's put in place by Proposition 13. This is certainly not a guarantee. Certainly homes are entrusted and are kept at that cap. They're passed from family member to family member. But it's just something that I found was interesting. Median home value very high. Most of your housing units are occupied. And again, just looking at where folks moved into their unit, a good majority of them have been there for quite a while. And despite the strong housing statistics, I did, on slide 6, take a look at what has happened in the Bay Area historically. And main point is that we are susceptible to some volatility in what happens with our assessed value. This chart really just tracks an index of home values over time and also looks at where recessions occurred. And in the most recent recession, you'll notice it was a very long duration, so the recession lasted a long time, and the severity of the decline was pretty steep. So just something, again, to keep in mind. I then took a look at the provisions that were contained in the draft KPOA MOU, and I really focus on just several main areas. One is the term. It's a 3.5-year duration. It's 4 years if you measure it from the expiration of their last contract agreement. So the term is January 1, 2015 through June 30, 2018, but their last contract actually expired June 30, 2014. So there's a 6-month contract gap. I looked at the current health plan provisions in the contract. Right now, as many of you know, the district provides 100% of the Kaiser Bay Area premium for active employees and their dependents. If an employee elects a higher cost plan, they're responsible for 100% of the cost differential. So there is some limitations. California law, CalPERS regulations, I should say, there's something called symmetry, which means that both active employees and retirees have to be offered the same benefit. So what you see in the second bullet on slide 8 is that retirees also get 100% of the Kaiser Bay Area premium for themselves and their families. This contract, however, does include some new language that adds a vesting provision, and I detail it out here. Don't need to go into specific detail on it, but essentially it allows the district to only contribute 50% of the full premium amount if an employee works 10 years of service, and that ramps up to 100%, 5% per year after 20 years of service. It also requires that they have a minimum of 5 years of service with their current employer before they're eligible. So that is a concession that's included in the contract.
And this is for employees who are hired after the agreement takes effect, correct?
That's correct. So we did look at that. Current employees, vesting issues, the size of the district, obviously, it's probably not an easy thing to change or not a cheap thing to change. I looked at the pension benefits that are currently in place. So you have two categories of employees. You have classic members, who are folks who are hired prior to January 1, 2013, and then you have what CalPERS defines as new members, who are folks who join after January 1, 2013, who have no prior CalPERS service. So if you're a classic member, you have a benefit that is called 3% at 50, which is essentially the multiplier you get on your pension benefit and the age at which you can go out for a normal service retirement. For classic members, the district also pays what's called a pickup. Commonly, you'll hear people say EPMC, Employer Paid Member Contributions. So right now, the district for these classic members pays 9% of salary on their behalf. So POA members do not have to contribute towards their pension. The table on slide 9 shows how that would be ramped down over time, going from 9% currently to 6% upon ratification of the contract, 3% effective July 1, 2015, so just a couple months from now, and to 0% 7/1/16. That is the district's contribution. The employee contribution under the proposal would ramp up 3%, 6%, 9%, until in FY18, so July 1, 2017, the employees would be expected to pay 50% of the normal cost, the total normal cost, up to a maximum of 12%. And the normal cost for 2015-16 was 27.51%, so very likely that the 12% cap would be in place for officers under this agreement. For new members, there is already dramatic changes in the benefit that they have available required by state law. So the significant changes, it prohibits EPMC moving forward. It extends the final average salary calculation, which is how benefits are calculated. And it also limits, significantly limits, I should say, pensionable earnings at the Social Security wage base. So that was part of PEPR reform. And PEPR reform is expected to incrementally lower the cost, incrementally lower the normal cost over time. It's a very slow process, but you will start to see results, but it's down the road.
That'll be with a mystical sale, about 25% of real estate that's Prop 13, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the last thing, and this is the other key provision that's in the draft MOU that has an economic impact on the district, is the salary increases that are included, commonly referred to as general wage increases or cost of living increases. So because the contract requires employees to contribute more towards their pension, they're also phasing in sizable wage increases. So it includes January 1, 2015, a retroactive increase of 3.75%. That would be followed by another 3.75% increase July 1, 2015, and then two 4.25% increases, so 4 1/4, It's a total 16% increase, a cumulative increase over the contract period of closer to 7% because you factor in the compounding nature of COLAs. If you subtract out the 12% offset, you see a net employee wage increase of about 5% of pay. So 5% net pay increase, 17% roughly due to the COLAs that they would receive, minus the 12% EPMC that they would begin to pay, which they aren't paying now. And that would average out to about a 1.5% to 1.25% net increase over the duration of the contract, depending on whether you measure it as 3.5 or 4 years. Did you have a question?
Per year, that is, right?
That's correct, yeah, per year. So we talked about this at length the last time I was here. We had a very small budget to perform this analysis, and I really wanted to look at comparability, wage comparability. It's a provision in the fact-finding law, AB 646. It's important, but again, we did not have time to conduct a full and thorough analysis. Having said that, I've had a number of conversations with folks here about this issue. When you look at wage comparability, you have to remember that there are no twins. No two employers are going to be exactly alike. So when you evaluate any agency's relative compensation level, you have to understand and think about a couple key questions. And those are, what are the most relevant group of employers? And with any grouping, given that not everyone can pay above the average, it's mathematically impossible, what's a reasonable relative position? So while comparing yourselves to other police agencies provides helpful reference points, at the end of the day, it's only fully meaningful when you consider other relevant factors. So local labor market considerations, relative economics. You want to look at your employer's financial condition and tax structure. I can't stress enough how different the district's tax structure is from a regular municipality. Job responsibilities and duties, and finally you want to look at whether or not you have any specific recruitment and retention problems. Again, just going back to the revenue issue, most police services are provided by municipalities. Municipalities have a much broader set of revenue sources. Sales taxes, if they have a hotel, transient occupancy tax is very common, utility user taxes, which are taxes on cell phones and telephones and other utilities. All of these things create a very different structure. So when you compare to a city, you have to keep that in mind. So I did do a very limited analysis, and it's on page 13 of the analysis, and I looked, just because of time and because I wanted to use information that I had available on hand, I looked at 4 other agencies that are in the local labor market, the cities of Albany, Berkeley, El Cerrito, and Richmond, relative to police officer compensation here at the KPOA. I have a little caveat statement at the top there, just to reiterate the point that this is not a full comparability analysis, but the point here is that your officers are not paid at the top of the market in this universe of comparable police agencies. I also looked, if you turn to the next slide, slide 14, at a prior compensation study that was conducted by a different consulting firm, Coffin Associates, and they did this in 2013. They did a much larger review of the KPPCSD relative to other police districts in the state. They came up with an entirely different universe of comparable employers, and they found similar but somewhat different results. They didn't find the same difference that I did. They reported that police officers were about 8% below median. If you looked at just base wage, that they were only about 1.2% behind other employers if you factor in total compensation. And it was similar for the police sergeant position, 10.7% below the median for monthly salary, 3.6% below the median for total monthly compensation.
Quick question from
yes,
the gallery over here. Now, the compensation that you figured here, is this under their old contract or is this under the proposed contract?
Are you talking about slide 13 or 14?
13.
So 13 is So the last sentence in the first bullet, it's as of 6:30, assuming the implementation of the KPOA MOU.
So this would include that first year 3.5% increase?
3.75.
3.75.
It's in there, and it also does not add 3% EPMC. So I subtract out I assume that the contract was ratified today.
Okay, all righty.
Yes. So it's very uncommon when you're doing a compensation study, a comparability analysis like this, to include premium pays that would require additional hours of work. And the reason is we don't really know what everyone else does for overtime. So overtime is really going to be a function of how many, if a budget calls for 30 officers and they're only able to fill 20 or 25 of those, that could drive up the overtime that it does not, no. And that's not uncommon is really what I should just follow that up with. Any other questions?
Do you have estimates of the overtime?
The overtime budget, so I did look at the overtime budget as part of the financial analysis that we'll get to, and it's a relatively small number. I don't think it has really exceeded budget all that much. I'm sure Chief could speak to that better than I can. 5.5? Yeah.
She said 5.5% is what's budgeted, but it typically runs double that amount, if I got the comment
And that's
right.
not totally uncommon to see overtime going over budget, and to see a 10% overtime number is also not uncommon. I've seen some cities that have significantly higher amounts of overtime.
Folks, just keep in mind one thing. We do have an officer who's on medical disability, but we didn't replace that officer, so we have to cover his shift, so that's why there's some overtime here. One officer broke his ankle. He's not working, so the other eight are covering that shift. So that's one reason why our overtime is over budget. You can deal with that fact. That's what the fact is, though.
Yes.
Why do you not consider the type of policing required here versus El Cerrito, Richmond, Albany, who have a much different kind of crime rate than we do, and much different requirements of the police officer?
No, that's an absolutely fair point and a very good question. And I probably didn't do it justice, but in my introductory slide where I talk about comparability context, I do say that one of the main things you do need to look at is job duties and job responsibilities and just the characteristics of employment. Some would say that a police officer is a police officer, but we know that that's really not the case here. The police services provided are pretty different than what's being done in a municipality, and that's absolutely correct.
One point that I'd like to make, though, is that the COF report does actually look at communities that are similarly situated to Kensington. So we looked at smaller communities, Moraga, for example, Brisbane, Clayton, et
And
cetera.
it also included the Broadmoor Police Protection District,
yeah.
which is just in sort of a community encircled by.
I said the COF report looks at communities that are more similarly situated to Kensington. So not the report that Alan, did, but the report that was done by COF.
I don't think Dr. Lossie can hear us at all.
You want to say?
Okay, let me try it. So the COF report, in contrast to what he's got here, comparing us to Berkeley, Albany, El Cerrito, the COF report that he referred to earlier was looking for communities that were more similar to ours in terms of the type of policing, acknowledging that the type of policing, say, in El Cerrito or Berkeley is different. So we looked in the COF report we tried to find the most similar communities we could. We still found that we're a little bit below, but not much, what they paid, if that's a fair way to summarize it.
8% below the median, right?
For monthly
police
salary,
officers.
but 1.9% below for the median for total monthly compensation, which really is the bottom line. So it's a little bit below.
And there may have been some overlap. They may have used some of the cities that I used, but I looked at 5 agencies. Their survey looked at a dozen. So there was certainly a broader universe, more inclusive group of agencies.
I want to say something right here. This is a broad overview, and I fully intend to call for another Finance Committee meeting where we'll have a chance to go into this in more depth.
Okay.
I want everybody to know that there'll be another shot at this, and we can go into a lot of these issues in greater depth. I'm limited. I limited Adam to 20 minutes, and so he necessarily has to sort of be very cursory in his description. So.
Yeah. So moving on to slide 15, I also wanted to just look over the last several contract periods to see where wage increases have stood. And as you'll note, there are some years where there's pretty sizable increases. There's a 6% increase July 1, 2008, a 4% increase July 1, 2009, and then it's followed by 3 years where there were no cost of living increases, and then July 1, 2013, a 3% increase. So if you just look at the last 3 contract periods, you see cumulative wage growth of about 13.5% for the POA. When you look at the San Francisco CPIW, so the Regional Consumer Price Index, it grew at about 13.8% on an annualized basis over that same time period. So their wages have actually closely tracked consumer prices and inflation. At the same time, the district's expenses have gone up significantly greater than that. So the bar chart on the bottom of slide 15 just shows what has happened to the single premium for the Kaiser Bay area CalPERS health plan from 2008 to 2015. So I actually added an extra year in the measurement period to capture a reduction in the health care premium that you experienced in 2015 when CalPERS actually lowered the rate by about 3.81% from 14 to 15. So if I really measured from 2008 to 2014, that number would be slightly higher. So turning to the real meat of the presentation, the main thing that I wanted to do was review the district's finances. And to do that, I started by looking at the 4 most recent audited financial statements that were posted on the district's website. I'll have you note, covered fiscal 2010, 11, 12, and 13.
We're on page 17 here, right?
Page 17, correct, sorry. The fiscal 14 audit is not yet ready. So we're stuck with 4 years that are somewhat historical at this point. But it does give me a good sense of where things were, where things are going. So I first looked at revenues, and I noticed that there's a significant increase in FY11 where there's the adoption of Measure G, which is the special tax for police protection services. It actually increased revenues by about 21% year over year. I did notice that there was a reduction in FY13 in revenues, and I found that that was really explained because in FY12 you had a slightly higher grant revenue collection. So it really isn't a loss of revenue, but you spent extra money that you received for grants in 2012. And I just wanted to be able to clarify why you see a revenue reduction. So if you take out the $100,000 expense in 2012, your revenues have been pretty flat. Looking at expenses, I found that on a compounded annual average basis, you have about 3.2% growth in your expenses. Your police salary and benefit expenses, which are the largest single expenditure for the district, grew by about 2.1%, so slightly less than expenses overall. And I did know, and you don't see this in the chart, that actual expenses have significantly outpaced budgeted amounts due to unexpected legal and waste recycling cost increases, and that's found in the budget's district expense line item. So that ratcheted up what you actually spent. Turning to slide 19, I just show the net impact of those previous 2 slides, so revenues minus expenses. And what you'll see is that in 2 out of the last 4 fiscal years for which audited statements are available, again, we don't know what happened for 14, even though those books are closed, the district used fund balance to cover its costs. The gap in 13, as I mentioned before, was really due to, yes?
fund balance means reserves?
Correct. Yes. So when your revenues, when your expenses exceed your revenues, you essentially draw down from a reserve account. And that's what I'm reflecting here. The gap in 2010, I should note, though, is really attributable to additional retirement costs associated with implementation of a GASB change, and also with the district beginning to fund its OPEB benefits. So now you have a trust where we're setting aside additional assets. So reserves, slide 20, I did look at your historical fund balance, and I found that the fund balance ranged from about 57 to 63% of general fund expenditures. There's an accounting change again in fiscal year 2011 where they changed how they categorized reserves from reserved and unreserved to non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And they have all different definitions. But the point is that you have a pretty healthy historical reserve level. You see a slight downward trend, but nothing that is unmanageable in my view. And if you look at just unassigned, which is really money that is set aside for no specific purpose, it's not restricted to be used for a reason, it's still pretty healthy. As of fiscal 13, 41.6%. So I did notice that the district does not have a policy with regard to reserves, so I wanted to just include some information in here that would help guide that process should you decide to move that route. And really what I called it was just developing a policy framework for coming up with an appropriate level of reserves. And there are a couple of just key points that I want to talk about and we can move on. One is revenue source stability. So you rely on property tax revenues. Property taxes are generally considered pretty stable, meaning they don't fluctuate as rapidly as some other economic and some other revenue sources that a municipality might have, such as sales taxes. Those tend to go up and down with the economy pretty quickly. At the same time, you really don't have a broad set of revenues. You're really just limited to property taxes. So from a revenue source stability perspective, you're limited. Expenditure volatility, looking at what are the district's contractual obligations and how will those contracts mandate expenditure levels going forward. It's important to just get a good sense of that. And are there new things that you're going to be doing? So I know that there's big talk about a community center renovation. You certainly want to make sure you're prepared to tackle all of those issues. Extreme circumstances, living in California, this is on everybody's mind, the threat of fire or earthquake. Are we able to go several months with no revenue collections or significant declines? Looking at liquidity, which is really just a cash flow perspective, when do we receive our property taxes, and when are our major expenditures coming in? And then, of course, leverage, which is really just what are the other items that we have out there that we're not funding? OPEB pensions. Do we have liabilities that are going to be carried on our balance sheet prospectively that we don't have funded now? But I will say this, and I should have led with this, there's no right answer to that. The adequacy of fund balance has to be determined based upon an assessment that you come up with. There are certainly best practices, and I can point you to those that would give you an idea of an order of magnitude of what might work, but your unique circumstances really should dictate what you decide to set aside. Looking at liquidity, I like to look that your cash and investments in the financial audited statement are equal to or in excess of your fund balance, which means that your fund balance is mostly cash. That's a very good thing. Sometimes fund balance can be in land, you can be in prepaid expenses. So this is just, for me, just a good check, and the district passes. Good ratio of cash investments to current liabilities. I also noted that you have very high fixed costs. Your personnel costs, so salaries and benefits, are about 80% of your total expenditures. That's not uncommon in governmental service to see expenditures for personnel that high, but it does mean you're at risk in the event that you need to quickly adapt. So the next slide, 23, is really just an overview of what I did next. So I looked at your historicals, I looked at the community profile, income, housing, things that I thought would be important for my forecast, and I developed a budget model that incorporates some assumptions about future growth or decline to revenues and expenditures largely following the district's current budget so that we could facilitate a comparison. I made a few minor changes, but they're not all that important. Before we jump into it, I just want to be very clear on this point. So because forecasts apply average assumptions to a relatively small budget with a relatively few number of people here, the estimates that you'll show in any forecast are going to be subject to some volatility. So actuaries will look at the law of large numbers and they'll say, well, on average, this will happen. The average might not apply here. It might not work well, but it's the best approach that we have to work with. Just thinking about the current staffing, one employee is 10% of your department. So if one person leaves that we didn't expect, that could have a significant impact. It could cause vacancy savings on the salary side. It could lead to additional payouts on the pension side. So just some volatility, we should be expecting it. That doesn't diminish the value of financial planning. And there's a couple of things that are really important. Why we do it? It's strategic. It helps to facilitate long-term thinking. It informs policy decisions. And it projects the impacts of policy changes over time. So in other words, what are the impacts of decisions that we make today down the road? And then obviously there's some financial issues. Do we have a structural budget deficit? What are going to be our future expenditures? How do we begin to afford to fund a community center renovation on a pay-go basis? Things of that nature. So specifically in my forecast, on slide 25, I outlined my key assumptions. And I will say I went line by line through every expense and revenue. They're not all outlined here. This is really just a summary. But property taxes, police tax, and the Measure G tax account for about 90% of all district revenue. So they're the lion's share of what's driving your budget, positive or negative. My forecast assumes moderate but steady growth in these revenues. So property taxes, I assumed average annual growth of 2.75%, ramping down to 2.5%. So an average annual growth in property taxes of about 2.58% over the 5-year forecast period. Keep in mind, Prop 13 limits it to a 2% assessed value increase, and then there's the potential for turnover, which could be reassessed at current sales price. So there's a potential to have revenues grow faster than the 2% cap. Your police tax, I grew, yes?
AV stands for what?
I'm sorry, assessed value. Police tax, I did not grow that consistent with the measure. There's no escalator in that. And then Measure G, which is your most recent special tax, it is linked to regional CPI growth. So I grew that based on a 10-year historical average. So I took San Francisco regional CPI over a 10-year period, and it was about 2.41%. On expenses, I include the impact of the economic provisions of the KPOA MOU, and then I also incorporate an inflation factor of 2% as a stress test for district sustainability. So salaries grow according to the salary scale. I also increased the salaries by 2% in the final 2 years of the forecast, just as a placeholder. I grow active and retiree medical benefits at 5 to 6% per year based on Siegel, which is a widely respected benefits consulting firm, based on their trend for HMO plans. And then I did the same for retiree medical benefits because it is the same plan. And on PERS, I incorporated the forecasts that have been provided by the actuary. And what you'll see in there is a side fund payoff in fiscal 19. So the district has significant reduction in how much it spends on pensions in fiscal year 19 when it pays off a side fund liability. And then I phase out the district's contribution on the EPMC, which is consistent with the draft KPOA MOU.
So Adam, we have
I need to
to,
stop you.
Yeah, yeah.
Just for a minute, it's 9:45, and according to district policy and procedure, we have to take a vote on whether we want to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock. So I'm going to ask for a motion to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock.
I I move we extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock until we're finished.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Could you
I'm
please
going slow,
try to
aren't I?
finish
Let
up
me,
for
okay,
us
ready
here?
for 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I model out two scenarios. The first scenario is under mainstream expectations, what I think would happen if the KPOA MOU was adopted, and those impacts are shown on slide 26. As you can see, there's a significant spike in expenditures in FY18 when the district does the community center renovation. The net operating surplus is shown on slide 27. You're balanced in fiscal 16 and 17. 17, the margin is not that significant. And then you have a drawdown on reserves in fiscal 18, 19, and 20. Fund balance is relatively stable in fiscal 16 and 17 when you implement the draft KPOA MOU. But again, when you move for the community center renovation, you begin to draw down on reserves. I also, to isolate the impact of the KPO MOU, I removed capital because I felt that capital expenditures, which are one-time in nature, are contributing to the reduction in your operating deficit or surplus. So when I remove that, your position looks better. It improves from a very narrow margin in FY17 to slightly more, but you still have years in the outer forecast where there are substantial gaps. And again, in fiscal 19, under scenario 2, you don't see a gap in fiscal 19 because of the side fund payoff, where you have savings on the PERS side. So what are the risks of this forecast? Well, there are absolutely plenty, ones I've already talked about, but certainly the economy. We have to consider where we are in the revenue cycle. The concentration of risk in property taxes is a real big risk. Pension costs, we really don't know what CalPERS is going to do from a long-term perspective with their discount rate and any other changes that they might make that the district would be forced to grapple with. You have no control over what rate they set on the pension side. Same is really true for your health and OPEB exposure. And then certainly overall personnel costs, workforce costs, you have to balance how much you're paying employees with the need to have a competitive workforce and to be able to compete in a labor market that might be able to pay employees a little bit better. So in summary, just a couple main points that I want to pull out. Wage increases generally have kept pace with inflation. Under the proposed contract, they will definitely exceed inflation because there's an offsetting with the EPMC phase-out. Though I didn't do much analysis on this of my own, the total compensation package received by POA officers today is not at the top of the market, either my survey universe or the recent COF analysis, which I didn't do, but it has similar results. I think you have pretty healthy reserves right now, but I do note that you don't have formally adopted reserve policies. And again, you have to balance those against limited options for raising revenues in the future and for uncertainty in the general economy. So at first glance, additional short-term costs associated with the draft MOU appear to be manageable given current revenue and expenditure projections over the next 2 fiscal years. Under our projections, the district has a narrowly balanced budget in FY17, followed by a deficit in FY18, at least under one of the forecasts, where the district is planning on doing the community center renovation. And in the out years under both forecasts, even with more moderate wage growth, remember in the last 2 years I'm only growing wages by 2%, you have a deficit. So, and finally, just moderate changes to this forecast, again, because your district is so small, could have significant changes in the overall results that we present. So that's really all that I have right now, but if questions or...
That's a wonderful report, Adam. Just a couple of questions, and then we're going to have to move on.
Before you go to questions, could I ask Adam just to clarify one thing for the board and the public? In his analysis, the last 2 years, fiscal years 19 and 20, he did include a 2% increase in salaries for police officers. And the reason I want to mention that is because when I do my analysis, my most recent one, that was taken out. I actually included 3%. So what I'm trying to say is when you're looking at the cost of this 4-year contract on the budget and where we're going to be at the end of the road, Adam has included 2 years of salary increases for years 5 and 6, whereas I did not, and that affects the end of the road reserve amounts by a small amount, but that would show why he's shown a deficit in those last 2 years.
That's correct, yeah. So our forecast, so we have different assumptions built into both of our forecasts. Probably none of them are exactly the same. We end up at similar positions despite the differences in our assumptions. But he's right, the major difference is the inclusion in my forecast of expectations for revenue, salary growth outside of the current contract term.
Thanks for clarifying that. Couple of quick questions and then let's move on.
Yeah, so that certainly is a concern. It's in my forecast.
The question is, what's the pension liability impact on this?
So the district right now spends about $600,000 a year, and I'm ballparking these figures, so don't quote me on it, but about $600,000 per year on its PERS costs. And that includes what it contributes directly to CalPERS and also includes the current pickup structure. So it's paying 9%, don't forget, which is about, I think, an additional $80,000, $90,000 a year. So your annual expenditure just on pension is about $600,000 a year. From a liability perspective, when you're looking at an actuarial report, you have, I think we just looked at this a few minutes ago, you're about 75% funded, and I have the data in my computer. I don't want to misquote it, but you're not any lower than what I would expect to see. You're in a position where your funding level is about what other agencies that we work with, where they are today. Do you want that to be higher? You certainly do. Do you need to be 100% funded? You most certainly do not.
Any more questions? One more and then we're going to wrap it up. Go ahead.
Just because of the physical area, you are always kind of feeling a little bit of danger because of earthquakes, et cetera. Is there any provision for controlling how the reserves are kept?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The question is, we're certainly in a precarious area from an environmental factor, fire, earthquake, hazardous, whatnot. Is there a way that we can create a reserve to accommodate that? Yes, absolutely. Many agencies do set aside contingency reserves, and actually in my forecast, I just created one for you at 25%, but it's not a current policy that could be set aside for an economic event such as that. But it could also just be your unassigned fund balance that you use to cover those costs. But certainly having a formal policy would probably be a good idea.
Is it normal for to set limits on the reserve, the amount of the reserve?
You know, you don't want, you want appropriate reserves because you do not want to get into a position where you're just saving money. You still have to provide service. So it's a balancing act. Most agencies we work with don't have a problem of having too much reserves. They have too little, just given where things are right now. The provision of services are expensive. So.
You know, there are a lot of gray areas. You're a little more frugal than most people.
I have no hair, so I can relate.
Okay, Adam, thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
a wonderful report. And we will be taking a second look, as I said, at our next Finance Committee meeting, and there'll be more opportunity for getting into the weeds. So let's move on to item 2 of new business. Chief, will you brief the board, please?
Every year, the board needs to approve the resolutions prepared by NBS that initiate the process of collecting the park assessment pursuant to the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972 that established the Kensington Park Assessment District. The first step in that process was the approval of Resolution 2015-01, which was the approval of the annual report for the Kensington Park Assessment District for its fiscal year 15 and 16. or I should say 1516, not and. The total assessment for each dwelling unit is $15.62, with a total of 2,188 parcels to be assessed. The second step of the process was the approval of Resolution 2015-02, which was the initiation of the proceedings for the levy and collection of assessments for Kensington Park Assessment District for the fiscal year 15-16. The third step was the approval of Resolution 2015-03, which was the board's declaring its intention to levy and collect assessments for the Kensington Park Assessment District for fiscal year 2015-16, and setting the public hearing for that assessment for tonight, May 14th, at a regular scheduled meeting. Resolution 2015-03 was passed at the April 9th board meeting and was published in the April 24th issue of the West County Times. This met the requirement that the May 14th meeting be noticed at least 10 days prior to the public meeting date. Now, the final step in this process is the holding of the public meeting, which we're doing tonight, and the approval of Resolution 2015-04, which is the actual boards confirming the assessment and ordering the levy for the Kensington Park Assessment District for fiscal year 15-16. So what I'm asking the board to do is pass Resolution 2015-04, which is basically ordering the assessment of the levy for this upcoming fiscal year.
Any discussion, questions?
I move we adopt Resolution 2015-04 as it appears on page 109 of our packet.
It's 108, isn't it?
109.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, 109. I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye. Oops,
Any-
sorry.
I was just going to say.
I'm sorry.
Does anybody
Discussion.
in the community want to have say anything about this?
Sorry, trying to move us forward, folks, so we're not here forever. But did anybody want to comment or ask a question? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Don't leave till we sign this.
You're right, we have to sign it. Okay. Right now, item 3 here is on the agenda because Pat Gillette will not be available for the currently regularly scheduled June meeting, which would be the second Thursday in June, which I'm not sure the date, but the 11th. So what is being proposed, what I'm proposing here is that we change the June regular meeting date to June 1st. Because I think it would be good for us to have a full board to vote on the issues before us. So any discussion or questions about that? June 1st.
Does Thursday before work or no? No, it doesn't. Okay.
I'm sorry, when were you?
I'm sorry, what was the question, Rochelle?
It's the Thursday before, is it just moving it a week?
Oh, in May?
In June.
No, the 5th.
Yeah.
No.
No, the 4th. Is it the 4th?
No.
The 4th.
No.
She's leaving town on the 2nd, so.
Okay.
I'm leaving town on the 3rd, but and back on the 12th.
Oh, the 3rd, I'm sorry. So, any discussion, comments?
Sounds like a reasonable request, if we can all calendar it.
Yeah, we just can't get away from this place.
It will allow us to consider the candidates and make a decision, hopefully, on June 1st instead of June 11th. So
Yeah, see, we're going to, the chief's contract runs out May 31st, which means we will be without a chief until we hire a new one. So we want to, I'm sorry?
Yes.
June 1st is correct. So we want to move as quickly as we can to make the new hire.
Would it be 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock in the evening?
for the closed session. Or
Well, this is the regular.
The meeting would start at 6 with a closed session and then
Right.
segue into an open session.
Right,
Hopefully 7:30.
Yeah.
And then it would go, our Thursday meeting has been moved up, that's all.
We just have to check facility availability.
Oh.
Yeah, I noticed on the calendar that it says the Boy Scouts.
Yeah,
are
Cub
here.
Scouts.
Cub
Monday is
Scouts.
Cub
Small
room.
Well, we'll just have to find a place to meet.
They might do it. They might be available.
Do it at my house.
I've got a nice house, we'll do that.
Well, we could say June 1st or 2nd, depending on the availability of
I
the
think
location.
both nights or something.
here. Should we try the first and then?
All right, let's try the first. We ought to be able to make something work. Okay, so do I have a motion?
I move we hold the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just fiddling with my machine here. Why don't you go ahead? I can't get this
go
one.
ahead.
I move that we move the Thursday, June meeting to Monday, June 1st, to commence at 6 o'clock with a special meeting, segueing into the regular meeting at 7:30, and then going to 10 o'clock unless we vote to extend.
And so this will be in lieu of the regular meeting we'd normally hold on the second Thursday of the month.
Can we just cancel that now and tie it into this motion?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
We cancel the June, the regular June meeting in June. The regular June meeting we'd bring up to Monday, June 1st, and we would not hold the second meeting at the normal time. We'd hold the Monday, June 1st meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Is that coming out right? Am I not getting this right?
You get that, Greg?
Not really.
Yeah, I know, it's late.
We move that we cancel the regular meeting on June 11th and move it ahead to June 1st, Monday at 6.
Isn't that what I said? Oh,
Perfect.
I'm kidding.
Yes, Monday at 6 for the closed and Monday at 7:30 for the public meeting. Okay, I'll second that motion. Any discussion further? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. So get ready for June 1st, folks. So finally, item 4 here, I've put on the agenda because, as I announced before, Lynn Walter broke her arm. That's going to seriously limit her availability to work for the next several weeks. We have to get payroll out. We have a number of things we need to do that Lynn would normally do but will not be able to do. The chief's has gotten to his limit on the amount of vacation hours he can accrue under his current contract. And so what I'm suggesting here is that we amend his current contract to make the maximum accrual 250 hours to assure that he will be able to work every day in the office until May 31st to compensate for Lynn's absence. Any discussion or comment? I hear a motion.
Yeah.
What? I'm sorry. Comment? Go ahead.
Yes.
Sure.
You'll note on your agenda that this refers to a government code section. Normally, because this is a regular meeting, anything that the board is going to act on needs to be posted 72 hours in advance, and because Lynn broke her arm within that 72-hour period, there's just a formal process before you actually vote on the item that you need to go through to actually place this. Even though it did get onto the agenda, it didn't get on 72 hours in advance. So the process is that there needs to be a finding that immediate action needs to be taken this evening, and that the need for that immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda, both of which are true, in my understanding. But the board needs to formally vote and make that finding first by a 2/3 vote, which would be 4 members. Then it's formally on the agenda, and then you can go ahead and act on it. So.
All right, so the first thing is to make the finding itself, correct?
Right, make the finding that there's an immediate need to take the action, and that the need for that arose after the agenda.
All right, so I guess what I'm doing first is moving to make that finding.
I second it.
Any discussion, comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. No abstentions?
Wait. The finding,
Okay, the
The
first thing is the
finding-
finding
yeah,
is
the
that
findings first.
there's a necessity to take this action because of that event, because
Okay.
Lynn broke her arm.
I'm sorry, Len. I do have a point. I'm sorry, did we vote on it? I misunderstood you.
No, go
when
ahead
you
and
were-
go ahead and make your comment.
How did we come up with what's the formula that calculated 50 hours as the estimate?
I'm sorry, the formula that what?
200 hours to 250 hours, how was that determined?
Well,
I can explain that.
why don't you do that?
By the end of this month, will have acquired 246 and change of vacation hours, which I had planned on using the last 2 weeks of this month to get me back to, my 200. And with the inability with Lynn hurting herself, whatever, Lynn came to me and asked me if I would waive taking this vacation time. I said, well, yeah, I'd be willing to do that. However, my contract states that I can't accumulate that time. So if I were to waive it and not take it, I would lose 46 hours of vacation time.
Okay.
So the board, the first part of this is, one, the board has to make the finding that there is this need to take this non-agendized item that was agendized less than the 72 hours that Mr. Riddle talked about, and then the board is going to vote whether or not to let me accumulate more than my 200 hours, and we capped it at 250 just because we didn't want it to look like I was trying to bank additional hours to spike my pension in any way.
And is Sergeant Hull going to increase his hours to cover any of Lynn's absence, or?
There's no plans at any time.
It says district operations, so I don't.
Operations.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that need to be done that I'm not sure Sergeant Hull knows how to do. Greg and Lynn do most of the administrative stuff that's going to suffer from her absence.
Could Randy maybe address the situation of how this affects retirement or PERS contribution? Is this a long-term impact? This is not a one-time payout. This is actually then the hours are adjusted permanently for retirement,
Yeah,
right,
is
to
that
250?
Yeah, I know John's over there. I'm not the PERS expert. I'm a government law guy. And
Sorry.
I can address it if you like. So basically what you're doing is, when I retire, if I were to take my vacation as planned at the end of the month, I'd have 200 hours on the books that you would be required to pay me out of my payout for vacation time. So that 200 hours times my salary, and that would be the payout. I don't know if it's PERSable or not, and I don't think it has any effect on my pension down the road. So the difference is basically it's about, before taxes, if you allow me to bank that extra 46 hours, it's about $3,700 additional you'd have to pay out at the end of the...
It's a one-time check.
It's a one-time check.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand. Okay, thank you. That's all the clarification.
And I can say that generally those types of one-time payments are not included, I think, in PERS calculations.
I don't believe they are, but we were going to confirm that this week, depending on what the board was going to do tonight. I didn't want to go do all that work for nothing.
And just to make a point, I think we actually need Chief Harmon to be here while Lynn is gone, and this is a small price to pay for that kind of expertise and experience to get us through these next 2 weeks. So this, to me, is a no-brainer.
Could you repeat it? He couldn't hear, Pat.
I said, I think we really need this kind of expertise and experience while Lynn is out. We can't have both Lynn out and the chief out and run this district the way it needs to be run, particularly right now. So this, to me, is a no-brainer, whether it's
not a
PERSable
no-brainer.
or
I think
not.
it's a fair question.
It's a fair question, but to me, the vote itself is a no-brainer.
All right, so shall we retake this then, redo the motion and the vote? I
think there's a motion pending on the finding.
All right, there's a motion pending. We were having discussion. Who made the motion?
You did.
You did, Vanessa seconded. I mean, I
You seconded it. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Can I just confirm that was 5-0?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the motion on the finding.
On the finding.
On the
Now we
finding.
have to move to amend the contract consistent with the finding to make the maximum number of hours the chief can accumulate of vacation time to move it from 200 hours to 250 hours.
I so move.
I'll second that.
I'm going to ask one more question, I'm sorry. You said amend the contract. So is there a provision in the language, in the amendment of the contract that states that
The limit
nothing's
is,
retroactive, or, when you write this? I just,
There's a limit in the contract to his vacation accrual of 200 hours. That's in his contract. So if we don't increase it to 250, he's going on vacation tomorrow. We don't have a general manager.
no. I know, I understand that,
We
but,
have to amend the 200 to 250.
right, but can we do it for just a particular time period, from this time period to this time period?
Well, the contract ends at...
I know it ends, but there's no retroactivity or anything like that.
we're not, there's no intention to change the termination date, for example, right?
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, then,
Maybe I want to take that vacation after all this.
okay, we have a motion and a second, right?
Kind of forget who's doing who a favor here.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. The contract will be amended.
And Chief Harmon, I do thank you for agreeing to do this in a pinch. I know that this has been a difficult time for you, and I appreciate you.
It's a very difficult time
I
for me.
appreciate you showing the professionalism that you've showed all along.
Thank you. Yes, we do need to go to closed session. Do I have a motion to adjourn the public meeting?
I move to adjourn the public session.
I second the motion.
I have one thing.
Oh, what? Go ahead.
You should probably introduce John Holtzman. I don't know that he was introduced.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's one of the other attorneys. I don't think we're being charged for all three of these attorneys, in case anyone's going to ask that question. But, I'm sorry, that's right, Adam. Well, I called you Alan, so now I made you an attorney as well. Anyway, thank you very much for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming.
We have the other two items. So you want to stick around?
You're diligent. You're a diligent community.
Yeah, we have to. We have to come out.
On here?
Yep.
Okay, it's approximately 11:10. We have just finished closed session. On the first item, discussion of the MOU, no action was taken. On the second item, while, Randy, do you want to phrase that for us, please? There, you come over.
Will the camera pick up his sound?
Yeah. So the second item was the Schwarzberg litigation. The board met in closed session by a 5-0 vote. They will be directing counsel to withdraw the attorney fee motion as to the two final petitioners in that case, Ms. Kozel and Mr. Kohler. The petitioners who participated in mediation both agreed to pay the district some portion of their attorney's fees and also signed a non-disparagement clause. Mr. Kohler and Ms. Kozel did not do either, but nonetheless, in the interest of community harmony and closure for the community on this issue, the board has voted not to pursue any further the attorney fee motion.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
I second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is